Three more names have been added to Doug Christie's coaching staff here in Sacramento, and Jake LaRavia comments on his future with the Kings that I think will make fans pretty happy. It's all right here for you on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all offseason long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And Doug Christie's coaching staff continues to come together. We have reports of three new names being added to that staff, three names that I have gotten confirmed. They are real, they are legitimate, and I'm here to tell you about these three names, give you a little bit of information about these three gentlemen, their background, and what we believe their responsibilities will be to some extent here in Sacramento. Plus, some very interesting, very, I think, positive comments from Jake LaRavia. If you are a fan of LaRavia, if you want to see LaRavia return to Sacramento, I think you're going to be pretty happy with some of the comments that he shared. That's coming up in the next segment of the podcast. But let's look at these three names: Chris Darnell, Mike Miller, and Paul Jasperson, all being added to Doug Christie's coaching staff. We'll start with the first one, Chris Darnell, which this was reported this morning by the one and only Chris Haynes. Chris Darnell leaving his position as the head coach of the G League Canton Charge, in which I believe they are the G League affiliate of the Cleveland Cavaliers. So what the Stockton Kings are to the Sacramento Kings, that's what the Canton Charge are to the Cleveland Cavaliers. He's got a pretty extensive background. He was the associate head coach of the Canton Charge, which is like second in command, from 2021 to 2024. So had some significant responsibilities, then took over as the head coach last September, I believe. This was his first full year as a head coach, or as the head coach of the Canton Charge, and the Charge went 16-18, so a losing record, but it's not the biggest deal in the world, before now coming to Sacramento to be a part of Doug's staff. This is very common, right? We saw this 2 years in a row with the Stockton Kings, right? Bobby Jackson, Stockton Kings, a lot of success with the Stockton Kings. They're the number one seed. Bobby Jackson becomes the one of the top assistants for Nick Nurse and his staff at the Philadelphia 76ers. Of course, since then, Bobby is now returned to Sacramento as one of the main assistants, lead assistants for Doug Christie's staff. The very next year, Lindsey Harding, right, wins G League Coach of the Year. Again, coaches the Kings to the number one seed in the G League in Stockton. She then joins and becomes a part of J.J. Redick's coaching staff with the Los Angeles Lakers. So it's very common for new coaches to build their coaching staffs with top head coaches in the G League. Guys who, or ladies who kind of got their feet underneath them, right? Got experience as a head coach or as a primary lead assistant in the G League, regardless of their results. So this is a very common practice with Chris Darnell joining the Sacramento Kings. Before he was in the G League in his position with the Canton Charge, he's worked with the Phoenix Suns, the Utah Jazz, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Specifically with Cleveland, he spent 2 years as a player development coach and also helped to work in the film room from 2019 to 2021. So he has, as you can see here, a pretty significant resume when it comes to his experience around the league, his experience as a top coach, his experience in the film room, his experience working to develop players, which I imagine he won't be the head of player development. I'll actually tell you about the new head of player development later on in this segment. But he's going to be someone that is going to be on Doug's bench, probably a coach that's going to be working directly with one or two players, very similar to how Doug was always working with Domantas Sabonis, right? That's what I expect Chris Darnell to be. This is the next step in the coaching career of Darnell, and he was one of the top, I guess, candidates in the G League to make a jump to an NBA bench, and Doug went out and got him. Second, Mike Miller. Now, this is not the former NBA player. I know a lot of people saw this report from James Ham, by the way, of the Kings beat in ESPN 1320. Everybody saw Mike Miller, like, oh my God, the former rookie of the year, the sharpshooter that had a very successful NBA career. Not that Mike Miller. It's a significantly older Mike Miller. He has 3 decades of college coaching experience, right, as both an assistant and even as a head coach. Now, that doesn't mean that he's new to the NBA game, right? He has experience in the NBA as well. He joined the Spurs G League team and was there from 2013 to 2015. Again, this is after the 30-plus years of experience that he's had in the college game. He became the head coach of the G League Westchester Knicks from 2015 to 2019. So 4 years of head coaching experience at that G League level. Then he became an assistant with the New York Knicks in 2019. He was there from 2019 to 2020. He actually became the interim head coach of the Knicks that season when they fired their head coach. He's also worked as an assistant coach with the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Washington Wizards. So this is another veteran coach for Doug Christie to lean on. Not to the same level as Mike Woodson, who's coming in to be the associate head coach of the Sacramento Kings, basically the second in command to Doug. What Jordi Fernandez was to Mike Brown, that's what Mike Woodson is going to be here in Sacramento for Doug Christie. But Mike Miller comes in and gives another veteran presence, right? Very well established in both the pro and the college game, a basketball lifer, a wealth of experience. So another guy to really provide his wisdom and help with Doug, who of course has a tremendous amount of basketball experience and basketball knowledge himself, but having multiple guys on this bench that are seasoned vets to bounce ideas off of and get their feeling. Like Scott Perry, new Kings GM, has talked both in his introductory press conference and in Doug Christie's press conference about the importance of having different voices, so many different voices who are different in opinion, but unified on, there's a specific word he used, but unified on vision, I think is what he talks about, right? So guys that might not agree with everything Doug does, but they'll provide their input ultimately for everybody to come together to reach that goal. That's why you're seeing Doug go out and get young, up-and-coming G League coaches and adding them to vets like Woodson, Mike Miller, Bobby Jackson, right? It's a good balance that he's striking. And then speaking of youth, the new head of player development, as reported by James Ham and later confirmed, Paul Jasperson. Now, this is the guy that we have the least amount of information about out of the three. He's 32 years old, which is pretty incredible. I mean, I'm 31, so I'm very intrigued about a 32-year-old. And we've seen young coaches before, right? A 32-year-old stepping into a incredibly important position for the Sacramento Kings. As of right now, there's not a lot of talent to develop on the Sacramento Kings. But I think we all know the Kings are heading in a direction where more than likely they're going to start to get younger. Maybe it takes a couple of years for these contracts to run out, the Zach LaVine contract or for Domantas Sabonis' contract to become a little more tradable than it is right now. But being the head of player development, especially in a place like Sacramento, when the Kings have an abundance of draft picks available, now they might use those picks in trades, but your head of player development, that is a very, very significant job. Looking at Paul Jasperson's resume, he's in the past worked for the Atlanta Hawks. He worked at the University of Oklahoma and also with the G League Valley Suns, the G League affiliate, of course, of the Phoenix Suns. He has player experience both in the G League and as an international player. So he brings kind of the player experience to the table. Again, 32 years old, somebody who, I mean, again, to be in charge of player development, you have to, at 32 years old, he's probably done something incredibly impressive, right? Or he has just a love and a passion for teaching the game. And he's going to probably lean on his experience as a G League player, an international player. And some of you might go, Matt, but he never made it to the NBA. He never had success on the NBA level. So should he be a player development coach? That doesn't necessarily matter, because as we've seen in the past, sometimes the greats who have things come to them naturally because they're God gifted with talent, that doesn't mean they didn't work hard. But like some players who are just God gifted talent wise aren't necessarily the best coaches because to them, it's just natural, right? Like, why can't you do what I was just able to do this. What are you not getting? I'm not saying all of them are like that, but some of them are like that, versus guys who have had to scratch and claw and grind to have professional careers like Paul Jasperson has. He'll be able to teach, and I'm sure he's learned a lot that he now can pour into players. So for him to get this position, this very important position at 32 years old, he had to be incredibly impressive to Doug Christie. So I'm very intrigued. He's the guy I know the least amount about, but I want to know more about. So I hope I get the opportunity to meet and speak with Paul Jasperson in the near future and very closely monitor what he's going to do now as the new head of player development. But those are the 3 new names that have been added to Doug Christie's staff. When we come back, comments from Jake LaRavia about Doug Christie and his potential future here in Sacramento. Comments that I think are going to make you pretty happy. That's all coming here on Locked On Kings. Before that, though, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast, like I said at the top of the show, is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, although they're starting to wind down. The NBA Finals right around the corner. Every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live during the game. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Which players are showing up in the biggest moments, like Tyrese Halliburton in Game 4? Maybe not so much in Game 5. Jalen Brunson stepped up big in Game 5 to keep the Knicks season alive. You could be tracking their trends, and that could help you make some big money. Like, I think Tyrese Halliburton is going to ball out in Game 6 to probably punch the Pacers ticket to the NBA Finals. If I'm right, I can make some serious money on FanDuel. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If you win, you'll get $200 in bonus bets for you to really start playing and really make some money. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. So Jake LaRavia, who, if you remember, the Kings acquired at the trade deadline. He was one of the 3 main pieces that the Kings acquired. It was, of course, the Zach LaVine, De'Aaron Fox deal, the Jonas Valanciunas deal with the Washington Wizards, and then the Kings got Jake LaRavia from the Memphis Grizzlies. He impressed a lot of people right away, right? The way he played, the hustle that he played with. I remember his debut in Sacramento, how in the first couple minutes of him playing, like he got a steal on the defensive end, like he had a couple transition buckets, like a shot at the rim. Like, he is a guy that you could easily see becoming a fan favorite in Sacramento because of how he plays, the hustle, the energy. He appeared on the Basketball Insiders show and had some things to say about Doug Christie. Here are the most notable quotes. He said, "Me and Doug clicked pretty early just because he liked the way I play. I thought I had a really good relationship with him." Makes perfect sense, right? If we're talking Doug Christie guys, Jake LaRavia fits that mold, right? The way that Jake plays, how he leaves it all out there on the floor, how he hustles and plays hard every single time he was out there. Didn't mean he was always perfect, didn't mean he was averaging 15 points a game or anything like that, but when he was on the floor, he played hard, knew his role, and fought to make an impact. That is a Doug Christie type player, very similar to like a Keon Ellis, right? I think Jake LaRavia absolutely fits the Doug Christie mold, which makes a lot of sense for why the Kings would want to retain him. And speaking of that, LaRavia said, quote, "I told the Kings in exit interviews that if they gave Doug the head coaching job, I'd look forward to going back there even more." Jake also goes on to talk about like how much he enjoyed Sacramento. He complimented how great the fans were. So Jake definitely has an interest in returning to Sacramento. And it sounds like a major factor in that decision is Doug Christie. So now we look at the situation, the financial situation, because things did not work out or were not working out for LaRavia in Memphis. As we kind of got an idea, LaRavia has a little bit of some hard feelings with Memphis and how he was treated in Memphis and just how things played out for him. The Grizzlies elected not to exercise his fourth year option or his final year option on his rookie scale contract, which muddies the waters a little bit. What that means is that because they traded him to Sacramento, the Kings then take on that Memphis Grizzlies contract and that Memphis Grizzlies decision. So Jake LaRavia is now a free agent. The Kings and the Memphis Grizzlies are limited in how much money they can give Jake. Every other team, the other 28 teams, can give him whatever they want in a typical free agency standpoint. And he's not a restricted free agent. He's unrestricted because the Grizzlies, and then therefore by proxy the Kings, did not pick up his option and essentially waived their right to him as a restricted free agent. The Kings and the Grizzlies can only offer Jake like an annual salary that's equal to the final year of that deal, which is $5.16 million. Now, the Grizzlies, they don't care. They got rid of him, so that doesn't mean anything to them. So take them out of the conversation. But the Kings, who I think will be very interested in having him back, even if he was acquired in the past front office regime, not Scott Perry's regime, I think they would be very interested in having him back, especially if he has the endorsement of Doug Christie. Two things that I think work in the Kings' favor here. Number one is, yes, with the new TV deal, the salary cap is going up, but so are the salaries of all these other players, guys re-signing free agents, the free agents that are available in this class. Like, I don't think there are going to be too many teams out there that are willing to offer more than $5.16 million. And even if they do, it's not going to be like, oh, we're offering Jake LaRavia $10 million a year, doubling what the Kings can offer him. I just don't think that's realistic. But let's say they offer $1 or $2 million more. Well, it sounds like the relationship that Jake has with Doug and the understanding that's already between the two. Jake knows that if he returns to the Sacramento Kings in whatever capacity, assuming the Kings want him back and offer that $5.16 million or offer him a deal, Jake knows, okay, I'm returning. I'm going to have a role. I'm familiar with this coach. This coach likes me. I like this coach. We can hit the ground running and pick up where we left off. So that security and that knowledge and that understanding and relationship could be worth more to Jake than an extra $1 or $2 million a year. So I think the Sacramento Kings are in a fantastic position to retain Jake if they want to. And I don't see any downside whatsoever in bringing Jake LaRavia back. I'm realistic in what he is. He's at best, rotational player. But he's someone that the Kings need more of. He's a Doug Christie type guy, a young player that you can see fitting into this rotation for the Kings, having a role and playing that role and embracing that role going forward. I don't think Jake LaRavia is the type of guy that once he gets paid, you have to be concerned about him not playing with the same level of hustle and intensity as he did when he was trying to say F you to the Memphis Grizzlies and earn his next contract. I don't think that's going to go away because he got a contract for the Kings or whatever team offers him a deal. I don't see any downside at all to Jake LaRavia, especially if the max that they'll pay for him is $5.16 million a year, at least over his next deal. So I think if I'm the Kings, if I'm Scott Perry, granted, I'm sure a conversation needs to be had between the two, but if I'm Scott Perry, I'm like, yes, here's that $5.16 million. Come back, play for Doug Christie. Doug wants you here. We want you here. You want to be here. You like it here. Sign the dotted line. Let's get this going. Let's get into training camp and pick up where we left off. I think that's what the Kings should do with Jake LaRavia. I feel very, very good about that. I think we're going to see Jake LaRavia in a Kings uniform next season. So I put out a poll yesterday on X/Twitter, and I essentially said, like, these names are going to cost you 3 first-round picks to acquire. Maybe some of them minimum 3 first-round picks to acquire. Which one are you most interested in being the new kind of young cornerstone of your franchise? I shouldn't say young, younger or prime cornerstone of the franchise. LaMelo Ball, Trae Young, Ja Morant, or Zion Williamson. Now, the last one's a little tricky today because of the allegations. If you aren't familiar, there's some pretty serious allegations out about Zion and a abusive former relationship that he had. This is not the platform to talk about it. If any of these allegations are true, then I'm zero interest. If it comes out that these allegations are true, which he and his camp are very publicly and adamantly denying, then take him out of the conversation. And what's fine is over 3,600 people, nearly 3,700 people voted on this poll. Zion was last, only receiving 15% of the vote. So maybe we can just kick Zion out anyway. The other three, all point guards, all young / in their prime, that would become the new centerpieces of your franchise. All three of them come with risk. All three of them come with question marks, whether it's on the floor, off the floor, or are they even worth a package of minimum 3 first-round picks. Ja Morant barely beat out LaMelo Ball and Trae Young, receiving 31% of the vote. LaMelo Ball, 28% of the vote. Trae Young, 26% of the vote. Ja Morant on the floor, I think, is the best out of the three. Off the floor, we know Ja has his issues, whether it's punching an underage kid in a pickup game at his house or brandishing a gun multiple times on social media. Regardless of if that is handled or not, that's off-court stuff, plus some injury issues that he's had that the Kings and anybody and everybody needs to be aware of. And we don't even know how eager or willing the Memphis Grizzlies are to move on from Ja Morant. In fact, early next week, I'm going to have one of our hosts of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast join me here on Locked On Kings, and we'll talk about a potential Ja Morant deal, what that would look like, very similar to my conversation with Doug Branson of Locked On Hornets earlier this week about LaMelo Ball. What would it take for the conversation to actually be legitimate? Not just, hey, we're interested in Ja Morant. Oh, that's cool. Bye. Go beyond that, or go beyond hypothetical fantasy conversation. Most of these probably won't get across the finish line. Maybe none of them get across the finish line. Maybe the Sacramento Kings aren't even willing to put on the table in terms of draft compensation what it would take to have the conversation get to that point of legitimate consideration. But it's fun off-season content to talk about. So next week, I will have a conversation with Locked On Grizzlies about Ja Morant. I will have a conversation with Locked On Raptors about RJ Barrett, who is not going to cost nearly what these names that I just read off will cost. But RJ Barrett is a name that has been floated around that the Kings could potentially have interest in. So I'll have a conversation with Locked On Raptors about him. And Kyle Madsen from ESPN 1320. He's back from his vacation. I look forward to chatting to him about two things with the Golden State Warriors. One, a possibility of a Jonathan Kuminga trade. And two, how interested he thinks the Golden State Warriors would potentially be in acquiring Jonas Valanciunas and what the Sacramento Kings could try and get in that type of deal, because the Warriors desperately need a center. So that's all coming next week here on the Locked On Kings podcast. I have not forgotten about the fans only week or fans only shows that I want to do. I've been trying to figure out how to get everybody's schedules together to make these fans only episodes happen. And maybe it's not realistic to have 5 straight days over a week of just fans only episodes. Maybe they'll be a little bit more spaced out, but I do still want to do it. So if you were one of the people that I reached out to about being on fans only, they're still happening. I'm logistically trying to find a way to make it happen and get it done. I've not forgotten them. I've not dropped them. That is going to happen. So keep an eye out for that as well. Appreciate your support as always. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of the Locked On Kings podcast. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.